Find a toy for my cat to play with.
So, good morning, everyone. Good to see you this morning. I want to talk this morning about how muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. That's actually a quote from Alan Watts. Some of you may know him. He's now deceased. He was an Anglican priest, but he was not specifically a Buddhist, but he was a great popularizer of Eastern philosophy in the West. And I just love about him is he had a genius for sort of distilling profound wisdom into simple resonant metaphors like muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. And you know how I love metaphors, and you know how I especially love water metaphors. So we're going to talk about another one this morning. And at its surface, this metaphor just sounds like a piece of sort of practical earthy wisdom, but from a Buddhist perspective, it really unfolds into a comprehensive guide for navigating this turbulent landscape of the human mind that we all deal with. The muddy water is really a perfect metaphor for the mind in its typical state of agitation, all stirred up. And the radical instruction to leave it alone is the very essence of our mindfulness practice when you think about it. Just let it settle. Just stop trying to fix it or manage it or micromanage it or whatever. And this notion of leaving it alone, this mindfulness, it's not because it leads to some transcendent blissful state, but because it's a tangible, achievable clarity in our lives. From a Dharma viewpoint, the mind is not an inherently flawed entity to be wrestled into submission. It's a natural process, the function of the mind, like a body of water. This mud is not an alien contaminant, but it's just an accumulation of our own monkey mind, of our own busy mental activity, our anxieties, our regrets, our cravings, our aversions, the ceaseless stream of discursive thought, much of which is the experience of what the Buddha called dukkha, or suffering. And this background hum of stress that's always there, this underlying dissatisfaction, the suffering that the Buddha identified as a fundamental characteristic of an unexamined life. And so one response to the mud, if you will, is our typical response rather to the mud is to do something, to stir the water, to try to get in there and fix it. Feeling anxious, we frantically try to analyze and look everywhere for the source of our anxiety. We replay scenarios. We project into the future these catastrophic possibilities. If we're angry, we mentally prosecute the person who made us angry. We rehearse our arguments. We go over our wounds. We justify our unskillful behavior, and on and on. We believe that by vigorously engaging with the mud, by trying to scoop it out, by filtering it, by forcing it to the bottom, we're somehow going to achieve clarity. But think about how has that worked out for us? Not so well. For all of us that have tried to think our way out of an anxious moment, the frantic effort is the very act of stirring the mud, just making it worse. Our desperate attempt to control the mind only churns the sediment up from the bottom, just reinforces all of our conditioning. It makes the water impossibly opaque. It makes it impossible to see clearly. And our ego, this self-appointed manager of our inner world, is a terrible manager of the water. I mean, it just won't leave it alone. Instead of the wisdom of leaving it alone, it's just constantly in there digging around, stirring around, trying to control the mud. But the wisdom of leaving it alone is really a direct instruction for our practice. And this is not a call for apathy. It's not a call for resignation. It's a call for a highly refined and skillful form of non-interference. This is the very essence of mindfulness, non-interference. To leave the muddy water alone is to sit with it, to allow it to be as it is without judgment and without reactivity. In both meditation and daily life, we just learn to watch it, to observe the arising of a thought, emotion, or a feeling. That's the mud being kicked up. We just simply need to watch it. We note its presence and we watch it without grabbing into it or stirring it up further. We feel the heat of anger. We feel the tightness of fear. We feel the pull of desire. But instead of reacting, we simply observe these things as an impersonal, impermanent, transient event within the larger container of our awareness. So that's really the takeaway message for today. Instead of reacting to this, whatever's arising, we observe it as an impermanent and impersonal transient event, which is simply within the larger container of our awareness. As we practice this art of non-doing, of non-fixing, a natural process begins, just as Alan Watts' metaphor suggests. The sediment, no longer agitated by our frantic interventions, begins to settle. And in this settling, we begin to gain profound insights that are central to the Buddhist path. We directly experience the principle of impermanence. We watch stuff arise and pass away if we get out of the way. You know, this terrifying storm of anger or anxiety that felt so solid and so all-consuming is seen just to be a temporary cloud that, left alone, naturally dissipates. I mean, that's the freedom that the Buddha promised us. This, or a wave of sorrow just crests and then it recedes. We learn through direct experience that our mental states are not solid. They are not enduring parts of us, of who we are. They are fleeting phenomena. And this leads to the second factor of existence that the Buddha taught, that of not self. As we watch the sediment of thoughts and feelings settle, we begin to see the crucial distinction between the thoughts themselves and this pure awareness that perceives the thoughts. This pure awareness is bigger than the little me, the little ego. We realize we are not the mud. They are only just the experiences that happen to us all the time. We're not the anger. We're not the anxiety. We're not the craving. That's all ego stuff. That's all temporary. That's all arising and passing. But the identification with these mental events, thinking they are us, is the root of so much suffering. If we leave the water alone, we leave the mud alone by simply watching what arises, we disidentify from the contents. This is just fundamental to the Buddhist path. We rest in the spacious clarity of the water itself. Now, this is not an annihilation of who we are, of ourself. It is the recognition that this self we cling to is just a composite, an impermanent process, not a fixed identity. It's always in flux. And this clarity that emerges is not some sterile emptiness. It is a state of equanimity and wisdom, of seeing clearly as the water settles. When the water is clear, we can see the bottom of the pond. We can perceive reality more accurately, undistorted by this churning mud of our reactivity. In a practical sense, moment to moment, this means we respond to life's challenges with more skill and compassion. We don't lash out in an argument. We allow the initial flash of anger to settle. We create a space in there to respond more constructively, more skillfully to that anger. Faced with a difficult decision, we can allow all the anxious what-ifs, those scenarios, to settle down. That's just more mud. What if this? What if that? This enables a clearer, more intuitive intelligence to emerge. Our problem solving becomes more skillful. So ultimately, Alan Watts' wisdom teaches us that liberation from all this self-inflicted suffering is not a project of aggressive self-help or a project of aggressive self-improvement. It's not becoming a stronger, better, more forceful manager of our minds. To the contrary, it's a process of letting go, of trusting in the mind's innate capacity to find its own equilibrium as it settles. It is the profound difference between trying to micromanage every aspect of our experience and letting go of trying to do so. It's not a path of striving, it's a path of cessation. It's not a path of fighting, it's a path of allowing. Now, of course, the mud of life is always going to be kicking up and stirring up. It's a normal part of our existence. The mud will visit us again and again because of external events, because of our internal habits of mind, because of all the causes and conditions in our life. The wisdom is not in preventing the mud from ever getting muddy, the water rather from ever getting muddy, an impossible task. Of course it's going to get muddy. The wisdom is from learning again and again the simple, profound, and liberating truth of leaving it alone. Leaving it alone. So we constantly remind ourselves when we're feeling reactive, when the mud is stirring up, water is best cleared by leaving it alone. Some wisdom this morning from Alan Watts.